Hello friends, welcome to another episode of 3-Minute Game Pass. I'm Nathan, and today I'm going to tell you whether this Game Pass game is worth your time and bandwidth. Today's game is Boyfriend Dungeon. Have you ever wanted to date people who are actually weapons and then use them to traverse dungeons made up of your own insecurities? Well, now you can, because Boyfriend Dungeon is here. Let's get to it. Boyfriend Dungeon is a cross-release on Xbox and PC that does feature cross-save, which is great. There's no upgrades for any particular console, and the game is roughly 4 to 6 hours long. So what the heck is Boyfriend Dungeon? Well, like the intro stated, it is a mix between a dating sim and a roguelike dungeon crawler, with the catch being that all of the eligible people to date transform into weapons that you then take into the dungeon. You have lots of options to choose from. There are 3 male, 1 female, 2 non-binary partners, as well as a cat. So, there's a little something for everybody. And they also happen to all turn into weapons. Why do they turn into weapons? Don't ask questions. In order to build a relationship with these weapon people, you equip them and traverse a roguelike dungeon. Combat is fairly simple and done in an isometric perspective, where you have a light attack, a heavy attack, a roll, and a limited use ability. As you do more dungeoning, you increase your relationships with the weapons that you take on that particular floor of the dungeon, letting you take them on dates outside the dungeons, which increases abilities for the weapon that they are. The better your relationship, the better their moves. There's also a crafting system for gifts and cosmetic stuff, as well as events that happen on and off in the game's progressions, but overall the basic loop is dungeon dive, date, dungeon dive again, ad nauseum. So what do I like about Boyfriend Dungeon? Well, the idea of mixing dungeon diving with like a dating sim works surprisingly well. There was a funny moment where there was someone I didn't like, but his weapon was really good. And so I was like, I don't want to date this guy. He's kind of a weirdo, but I really like his weapon. And so I had to switch out to a weapon I didn't like for date the person I cared more about. It was weird. I just explaining that makes me feel weird, but it was an interesting idea, and I feel like it works together fairly well. I found most of the characters engaging, or at least engaging enough to continue exploring their relationships through the plot, so that's pretty important for a dating game as well. And lastly, the game is pretty easy, which makes it much more accessible than other roguelikes. Every time you do pretty much anything, you're advancing and getting stronger and increasing XP or something or other, and weapons go from basic to overpowered pretty quick, which means you can beat the game pretty easily. In terms of things I don't like, I feel like the writing overall was just kind of mediocre, which is unfortunate for a game that relies so much on its script. Characters sounded really samey in terms of their voice, especially over text, which is where a lot of the communication happens. And I felt like they could do more with the people as weapons concepts, but they didn't really do anything with it at all, which kind of disappointed me. Another negative is the combat is really basic and devolves into mashing pretty quickly, regardless of what weapon you pick. There's only 2 dungeons in the entire game, so there isn't a lot of combat, and it gets very samey very fast. And lastly, I felt like the weapon balance was kind of all over the place. Some characters' weapons are really, really good. Some characters' weapons are really weak. The one that relied on countering, I did not enjoy whatsoever, and it's just a bit frustrating that there's clearly better weapons than others. So as you know, I rate games on a 3-point scale. Must play, maybe consider, don't bother. This is definitely a maybe consider, and it's a tricky game for me to recommend, because first off, you have to be interested in dating games in general to want to play it. So if you do like dating games, I do think there is a lot to love here. The mix between roguelike and dungeoneering and relationship building works really well. Dare I say, like a stripped down Persona where the dungeoning and the relationships interact. But I feel like if you've been watching this review and seeing the content, you'll know whether this is a type of game for you. Bland dungeons and slightly poor writing aside. And that's all I have for you today. Thank you so much for watching, and go out there and date some swords.